Good morning and welcome along to this month's monthly webinar. This month we're covering the subject of VoIP. What is it, how does it work, and why should you consider it for your business? My name's David Ruddock. I'm the Managing Director of Insane Technologies. We are a specialist IT consultancy firm and we focus particular attention on the accounting, legal and medical healthcare sectors. Our focus is not just to help our clients reduce their IT expenses, but we also want to help them make more money through better use of technology systems. So a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone is on mute this morning. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box in the GoToMeeting little window. I'll endeavour to answer those questions as we go through, and we'll also have a bit of time at the end for any additional questions that you might have. So without further ado, let's kick off. What we're going to cover today, I'm going to give you a quick telephone services refresher. We're going to talk about what VoIP is, what are the benefits of VoIP technology, what do you need to use VoIP in your business, what are some of the VoIP gotchas that you may hear about or suffer, and also how we can help you if you're interested in VoIP. So quickly, just so that we all understand the terminology when we talk about telephone services, when we talk about your standard telephone lines that are part of the Telstra or whatever network, we refer to them as PSTN, which stands for Public Switching Telephone Network. And that's broken into typically two types of telephone service. There's either POTS, which is your plain old telephone service, or as we refer to it, an analog telephone line. Or ISDN, which is what you refer to as a digital telephone line, and many businesses will have, ISDN 10s, 30s, etc. When they have quite a few telephone lines happening. A DID is what we refer to as a telephone number, so it's the direct inward dial number that someone would use to call you. And PBX is what we often refer to as the phone system that you would have inside your office. It's that box on the wall that all the phones plug into. So what's VoIP? Well, VoIP stands for Voice over Internet Protocol, and basically what that means is that we are sending voice signals along a network connection. When we talk about VoIP and talking about making telephone calls over the Internet, the way in which that works is using a protocol called SIP, and that's the language in which the telephone system and the telco provider talk to each other. When you go and look at buying VoIP services from a VoIP service provider, you'll typically purchase what's called a SIP trunk. And a SIP trunk is basically a telephone line. If you want to look at it as an analog line, it would be a SIP trunk is equivalent to having one analog or digital telephone line. There's often a bit of confusion between IP PBXs and VoIP. So an IP PBX means a telephone system that connects to the handsets via the network that your computers connect to, or via at least a network switch. This differs from a digital phone system, which will typically have the telephone extensions plugged directly into that phone system, whether it's via a patch panel or however that works, but they don't plug into your network. And typically when we're talking about VoIP, we're talking about making the calls over the internet, although VoIP also covers the handsets to some extent. So with an IP PBX, as I said, we're talking about that a phone system that works on the network level, and an IP PBX can also make and receive telephone calls via your standard hardline phone systems, just as well as a digital phone system can make and receive calls via SIP trunks with the right hardware and upgrades. So what are the benefits of VoIP? Well, most people will tell you the main benefit is going to be on cost savings. And sort of examples of the cost savings you'll get are 9 cents untimed local and national calls Australia-wide, 16 cents per minute for calls to a mobile, and you'll often see calls to international destinations that start at around 2 cents a minute. Now, this has an added advantage for any business that's running 1300 or 1800 numbers, because if you run a number service like that, you pay for the calls when people call into you. Now, if all of a sudden your call costs are reduced significantly, it'll help reduce that overhead in running one of those type services for your clients. There's also another advantage which is not often spoken about, and that's that all of a sudden you go from having two distinct systems to manage to having one network that gets managed, and that can have cost savings as well for whether it's the business, the IT provider, or whoever's maintaining your voice and data system. Another advantage is in device connectivity. All of a sudden you've got a wide range of IP-based or network-based handsets that you can connect to from a wide range of vendors and brands. You can also get a thing called a soft phone. And a soft phone is essentially a piece of software that installs on your computer which allows your computer to then become an extension on your phone system. So say, for example, you could have an engineer, a technician, or a service worker out in the field. They have the soft phone software installed on their computer. They can then become an extension on your phone system, and if they needed to make telephone calls or receive telephone calls from out in the field or their satellite office, or you might have a call center where you don't particularly want to outlay the $100 to $300, $400 per handset, and instead can put soft phones on their machine and give them a headset to work with. You can also start connecting up your mobile devices as well. So all of a sudden your mobile phone, your tablets, etc., can start becoming part of the telephone network and be actual extensions, not just a phone that you divert out to. I was in New Zealand a couple of years back, and I hooked into the Wi-Fi network that I was at there and was able to become an extension of our phone system, so I could make calls back to Australia for a lot cheaper, so that we could continue to communicate with our clients. A couple of the other benefits as well is a thing called rich media, and what we mean there is things like video conferencing. Now, whilst video conferencing is available in your typical telephone system today, it's generally quite basic. Now, with VoIP, you now have really high quality video conferencing, so if you want to have multiple parties in a conference, you can do that. A lot of the VoIP-enabled phone systems will allow you to have instant messaging as well, so you can start communicating with other members of your team through another method of communication, which is really good, especially if you want to not give them the option of installing Skype or Gtalk or anything else where they may start talking to their friends. You've got this private instant messaging network that they can communicate with rather than sending emails. You can also look at who's online, what they're doing, and even peek into telephone calls using some of the advanced software that allows you to integrate with the phone system. One of the really good things about VoIP as well is number portability. So previously, if you operated a business, say in Southport, and you were using just a standard standard POTS analog telephone line, and you decided to move your business, you would lose that number, and you'd have to then set up diversions from the old number to the new number. Now, with VoIP, you can take that number wherever you want, because the number is tied into the VoIP provider and not the telephone exchange. So as long as you've got an internet service, that number will work. Now, an example of that is when we moved from our office in Ashmore 2 years ago, we ported our telephone number, which was a local Ashmore number, to our VoIP provider and took that to our business in Bundle, and are now able to operate with the same number. That means that for nearly 10 years now we've had the same number, despite the fact that we've moved quite a distance. What this also means from a business perspective as well is that you can continue to operate that phone system and your telephone lines anywhere in the world as long as you've got an internet presence, which brings along a really critical component which is lacking in fixed line services, and that's business continuity, because all of a sudden you aren't constrained by the telco. Should your telephone lines go down, should the building get should we have floods or storms or something that's going to stop you from getting into the business. Previously or currently, you have to call up the telco and ask them to put a line diversion on, and we all know how efficient the telcos can be. With a VoIP-based service, you just have to log into a website and then have the phone diverted to a mobile or a different number. So you've got an enhanced ability to keep your business operating no matter what happens. So what do you need to have a VoIP service? Well, obviously you can get an IP PBX, and there's a wide range of solutions out there that you can use. If you've got a fairly advanced digital phone system, quite often you can get a module that they install into that phone system which allows it to talk with the SIP protocol. You can also get boxes called SIP ATAs, and what they are is basically it's a device that sits on your network that you plug a telephone into, and it converts a telephone line into a VoIP service. Now, I've used these in various places. They do work, but I would hazard against them because you're adding an extra level of failure to your network, and if something goes wrong, you've got to hunt through the additional things to fix it. And there's also another thing called a virtual PBX, and this means that all of a sudden the phone system itself is hosted in the cloud with your VoIP provider, so you don't have to have a big box on the wall that you have to maintain and all the rest of it. It's all done in the cloud. You have a web interface. You can provision new phones just by logging in, creating the phone, and that means then if you are going to set up, say, satellite offices or people working from home, you just have to ship a handset out to them, or a soft phone, or maybe the software for their mobile phone. They log in with the details, or it can be self-provisioned, which means it gets set up automatically, and they're up and running. And so all of a sudden you could have an entire business that's spread out in many different locations, all running on the same phone system, but without you having to have any physical hardware anywhere, just as long as you've got a good internet connection there. So what do you need really when it comes to VoIP? Well, bandwidth. All of a sudden you're going from using the fixed line for making calls to using the internet, and so the number one thing you need is internet performance. Now, getting a little bit techie here, the typical what we call codec, which is the way in which the audio is compressed and converted and transmitted, is called G711. Now that uses 64 kilobits of data in each direction, but we generally work off 100 kilobits because of overheads and faults. G729, which is a much more advanced codec, is available, and it works on about 8 kilobits, but it requires a license, so you'll very rarely see phone systems that support this out of the box. Your typical office internet connection is between 8 megabits and 20 megabits download speed, and 384 kilobits and 1024 kilobits upload speed. So what this means, if you're unlucky and you have a 384 kilobits upload speed, because the upload is as important as the download, and since that's your slowest speed, we have to use that to work out the number of lines you can have. So if you've got 384 kilobits, you're probably only going to get about 3 lines on that service for VoIP. If you're lucky enough to have 1024 kilobits or 1 megabit of upload speed, you can probably get about 10 lines concurrently with a VoIP service. So easiest way to find out what your current internet speed is to jump onto www.speedtest.net and run a test, and that'll give you a fairly good example of what you can expect from your service. You can also go online to a website, www.adsl2exchanges.com.au, and on there you can type in addresses, and it'll give you a rough idea of the ADSL2 performance you should expect at that location. Now, if you're lucky enough to have fiber or some other high-speed technology, you won't sort of suffer from those things, but most businesses are going to use ADSL2 because it's more affordable and more available. A couple of the VoIP gotchas. I mean, there's a lot of salespeople out there talking about VoIP and putting it in a very negative light. The reason for this is ultimately because the telcos have seen the writing on the wall with pricing and are now coming in with some very competitive pricing to try and not lose business to VoIP. But the main thing that you should do is research who it is that you're looking to partner with. Don't just go based on price alone. Ask colleagues. There's a website called Whirlpool. Now, back when Telstra first introduced the Big Pond cable network, Whirlpool sprung up as the source of all information on Big Pond cable, but it's grown from that over the years and become basically a website full of information about the Australian internet community. And there's a whole forum there for VoIP. And if you can't find a particular VoIP provider or SIP provider on Whirlpool, I wouldn't touch them. And cheap, as usual, doesn't always mean good. There's a lot of people out there selling extremely cheap VoIP services, you know, X amount per month for unlimited calls. Obviously, there's got to be some cost cutting somewhere to provide that. The other big gotcha I notice is when people try and use the same internet service that their business runs on for general internet activity for VoIP. There's a lot of people out there who are offering VoIP services and talking about this thing called quality of service, or QoS, and they're telling the prospective clients that they can rig the modem, router, firewall, whatever, to allow VoIP to run well. Bottom line is QoS, which is the process of structuring the flow of data so that certain things get priority over others, only works in a controlled environment. The moment it gets to your modem, router or firewall, you're governed by the internet connection and all parts between you and where you're trying to get. So it doesn't matter how advanced the firewall is or how clever the person is with their QoS rules. Once it leaves your leaves your network, you lose control. So get a dedicated internet service for your SIP trunks. If you do that, you'll generally have a really good VoIP experience. We've been running VoIP now for, I think, somewhere between 6 and 8 years, and we don't use standard lines at all anymore. Don't use a cheap internet service. If you're going to go out there and get some, you know, $30, $40, $50 a month internet service, then you can expect probably to have fairly pathetic VoIP results as a byproduct. And if it's available, get an internet service from the VoIP provider themselves. Now, the reason I say this is if they have internet services that connect directly into their network, you're going basically from your network straight into theirs, which means that you won't be affected by any of those other conditions that people will typically use QoS to try and overcome. So, how can we help you? Well, if you are interested in VoIP, we can always consult with you on your business needs, review your current telephony system and whatever costs you're currently running, and try and work out, will a VoIP plan help you reduce costs? I mean, it does depend on how your business uses your phone system, how many local, how many national, how many mobile, how many international calls you run, whether you have a 1300, 1800 service. From there, we can actually go to tender to the telcos and VoIP providers for you, and we'll put your current bills in front of them and sort of ask them to tender for your business, so that you don't have to put up with all their BS and typical salesman actions. And then we can come back, sit down with you, present the options for your review, and work out for you what is really the best option for your business, then sit down and implement that solution for you. So if you're interested, always reach out. That's pretty much it for my presentation. Has anyone got any questions on the topic of VoIP? I've just had a question from Kirsten, which is why does Skype not charge, and Viber, etc.? So Skype doesn't charge when it's a call from one Skype client to another. However, if you want to call a local number in a particular country, you do actually have to purchase Skype minutes. Same deal with Viber and all the rest. And in fact, if you have a look at some of the VoIP providers, so say for example, we currently use MyNetPhone. If we were to call another business who are using a MyNetPhone service, it's actually free from a MyNetPhone service to another MyNetPhone service. I hope that answers that question. Why do they still charge when using the internet? So ultimately, you're spinning from paying for a telephone line service to paying for an internet service. There's still got to be some form of conduit by which the transmission of your voice goes. When you're paying for your telephone lines, whether they're digital or analog, that's essentially the bandwidth there that you're paying for, whether it's number of lines or number of channels. When you move to VoIP, you still need some sort of conduit to send and receive the voice signal, and that becomes your internet service. But ultimately on that as well, if you've got more bandwidth, then you can actually get a much better cost basis off the internet service than you might on buying the same number of equivalent lines, whether they're digital or analog. If there's no more questions, that will wrap it up for this month's webinar. Thank you very much for joining me. If you've got any feedback about this webinar or any of our webinars in the past, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always interested in hearing what subjects you'd like to hear about next. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.